Senator Cory Booker is a Democrat from New Jersey. As you just heard, he questioned Judge Jackson during her hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And of course, he voted to confirm her today. Senator, I have heard many people quote after that exchange that "I'm not letting anyone steal my joy" line, which has become, I think, a sort of mantra in very, very stressful and often very dark times. How are you feeling today?
Look, I feel overjoyed. So nobody stole the joy. But look, you have to understand there's a lot of Americans who carry private pain and hurt from experiences in their lives where they were disregarded, demeaned, degraded. I think a lot of people connected with this incredible judge, now justice, who endured outrageous insults in some of her questioning, even though she was more than qualified not only to be in the room, but perhaps more than qualified to many people in the room. And today is a day of healing for a lot of people. Today is a day of triumph for a lot of folks. And it's definitely a day of celebration to see this glass ceiling shattered in what is a Jackie Robinson moment for America.
You know, I think it became clear. I don't think there was a ton of suspense about whether she would get all 50 votes of the Democratic caucus. Particularly Manchin came out and said so, but I think there wasn't a lot of fear about that. There was, I thought, genuine suspense about whether she would get any Republican votes. And she did get 3 Republican votes. It struck me as quite significant that she did, that this was a bipartisan vote. What did you think? Were you surprised by that? Are you grateful for those votes?
I'm deeply grateful, and I have to say, you know, Mitt Romney voted against her for her circuit court nomination, and so he really had to step out to do this. And I thanked him on the floor after the final tally was said. And you know, again, she is a person not only that got bipartisan support in a time of deepened tribalism, where any Republican that steps across the line faces fierce backlash, but she's also somebody that got to that room with the support of the largest police union in the country that represents the majority of police officers. You had conservatives coming out, not just to endorse her, but even, and I read from a conservative columnist that said, I wouldn't support her, but the attacks on her are demagoguery and wrong. So here's a person that just is so qualified. I mean, that's the thing about her. She's so extraordinary. I even during the hearings, and maybe just notice, it was hard for me not to be overwhelmed with emotion and joy just watching her sit there before all of us and show us the truth of who she was.
Yeah, you know, I said this before, and I'll say it again, which is that, you know, the Venn diagram of people that are very smart, incredibly capable and competent, and people who are good at talking and explaining things. Like, there's lots of people who aren't that good at talking and are super competent. There's some people who are super incompetent and are good at talking. Those ones are dangerous. But it was very striking to me what a formidable and charismatic presence she was just at that level at the hearings.
Yeah, Chris, I'm telling you, behind closed doors, when she met with individual senators, I had more than one Republican come up to me and say, wow, she resonates. You connect with her. She is a gifted soul.
Yeah.
And I think that people knew that. And those that came at her in a foul way, and again, it wasn't the majority of Republicans, it was a handful. Those folks really had to go deep into the sewer to ignore the truth of who was before them.
The reason that we're here today, there's a bunch of things that happened that produced this outcome. The come from behind, upset, improbable victories in Georgia being among them to win those 2 Senate seats to secure a majority. But I want to play you what then candidate Joe Biden said back in February 2020 about his pledge. He made a very transparent promise about if he's elected the next Supreme Court vacancy. Take a listen.
The fact is, what we should be doing, we talked about the Supreme Court. I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court to make sure we, in fact, get every representation. Not a joke. Not a joke. I pushed very hard for that.
Not a joke, Senator. Not a joke. Literally, seriously. And he did it. And there was a hue and cry raised about this, right, at the outset, which I think kind of went away when the actual nominee came. But what do you think about the arc of that pledge to delivering on it to having this day?
Well, the pledge to me said simply this: there have been not just now, but generations of black women that were more than qualified to be on that court, probably more qualified than some people that got on that court. But for generations, they saw a sign that you need not apply, you will not be considered. But this was a president acknowledging we have a depth of talent in many sectors, and I'm going to change history here and reach deep into the well of talent of black women and affirm the truth, which he did. He succeeded in showing America about how spectacular of talent we have in the black community, amongst black women. And so it was a great moment on a campaign, a la Ronald Reagan, who did that by announcing he would do a woman during a campaign, but even more so that Biden followed through on it and made such a transcendent selection.
I don't want to steal your joy, but I do want to end on this question. She will this summer. She will ascend to justice at the end of this term. She will be in a minority of 6-3 in terms of the nominees in the court. We don't know what will happen in any given outcome. But there is widespread anticipation that this term could be really brutal. I mean, we could see the overturning of Roe. You sit on the Judiciary Committee. What is your message to progressives, to Democrats, about how to think about this court as we prepare for a series of decisions that could have truly, truly ghastly impacts on people's lives?
Well, elections have consequences. And I've watched over the years how the extreme right has invested, rallied, pushed, and fought to make sure their agenda now is before America. And it doesn't represent the majority of America. Heck, 5 of the Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court were nominated by a president that did not win the majority. And it should be a lesson to us if elections matter, if fundamental rights, like we see these laws being passed in states where women who are survivors of rape and incest, there are bounties out on them if they go to get an abortion. And so we have to dig in now more, be prepared for what's to come, but understand that the next election and the one after that and the one after that are building blocks to who's going to have the majority of the court in years ahead. The far right has been very good at changing the court. Even Republican nominees now are no longer the kind of moderate justices of the past. Now you have people trying out by going as far to the right as they can on a lot of these areas of jurisprudence. So I hope every progressive understands what's at stake and what we're staring at right now as a result of us losing narrowly a lot of elections.
Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, thank you for making some time for us tonight.
Thank you for having me.